folks. Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, live from Israel, the Ethics of the Fathers, with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Always a joy to be with such a wonderful rabbi who's pouring out his heart with a ton of energy, and I enjoy every moment and the angle with which he comes at it. I'll encourage everybody, get a copy of Pirkei Avos. Read it, look closely, but ask a learned rabbi exactly the depth of it, and he'll explain it. And nobody better than Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Rabbi Coffman, you're live on the air. You've got the stage, sir. Always good to be with you, and welcome.
It's always a pleasure. Hopefully my voice is coming back. You know, all that yelling and screaming in classes, I don't know. You know, for some reason, it just keeps going, comes in, comes out. So, you know, do our best. As long as you don't get me riled up, we should be, we
no
should
politics.
be good. We'll see. See, my voice is coming back a little bit. So hopefully we should be good. We're still in the fifth Mishnah, second chapter. I think, like we mentioned before, I think we're going to be here. Definitely think we're going to be here for a little bit. We are still in the middle of don't believe in yourself until the day you die, right? And, we mentioned, we spoke about, Yochanan Kohen Gadol, Yochanan the high priest, right? 80 years served as the high priest, went in and out of the Holy of Holies, didn't die, and then in the end becomes a heretic, right? We spoke about Elisha ben Abuya, known as Acher, the famous rabbi of Rabbi Meir. So he's spoken, in different contexts, a little bit what it means, not to believe in yourself to the day you die, because the evil inclination never gives up, right? Even if the evil inclination does its job, and his job is to make us stumble, to make us make mistakes. So essentially, if we don't do that, if we hopefully stay in the straight and narrow path, what does he do? He's got plenty of patience, right? He's going to, he'll find a different way, right? But as long as he has a little bit of a hole, if he's made a drop of a hole in the armor, then the evil inclination says, okay, now it's only a matter of time. Now all I have to do is dig a little bit deeper, right? Get you this way, get you that way, get you the other way. But he doesn't stop, right? He just doesn't stop. So you have to continue fighting at every standpoint. You can't just rest on your laurels. Just because you beat him today doesn't mean you beat him tomorrow, right? It doesn't mean the evil inclination's not going to come up with something that you didn't think of, right? And it'll hit you in different ways where the whole goal is just to make you weaker, right? The whole goal is to make you think, right? To have doubt. There's nothing worse than having doubts and not knowing which direction you're going. I can tell you my own personal life when I was in the middle of university, and I saw that where I was certainly wasn't true, trekked out on a different path, did it myself, and I'd look into things I had, no idea about, major doubts over here. Am I going to be happy? I'm not going to be happy. Is it really going to be the truth? Is it not going to be the truth? And there's nothing worse than that. There's nothing worse than not having clarity. Nope. And, our goal, and we live in an upside down world, so we have to try and understand to the best of our ability, right? To have that clarity. And where does that clarity come from? We're not like the Christians say, oh, I believe, God's going to send me a message. Maybe, right? But there are no prophets today, right? Talmud says that the only people that are prophets today are either imbeciles, right? People that are mentally challenged, or little children, right? Little children are prophecy? I don't think so, right? So, we have to look into the Torah itself. The Torah has so much information. It's not like it didn't think of something that we're going to be going through, whether in the future or, whatever it is. Torah's pretty clear, what's going to happen. Now, we are living in a world of hiddenness within hiddenness that God does not reveal himself, right? The last time God revealed himself was in the miracle of Hanukkah, right? I gave a class on early Friday, my time, on the story of Purim. When you look at the story of Purim, the book of Esther, unbelievably miraculous, but God's name's not mentioned. In all the 24 books of Tanakh, the Torah, the writings, the prophets, God's name's mentioned in all of them, except one. Right? The one where he's not mentioned is in the book of Esther. But when you read the book of Esther and you look at all the details and you look at everything that happened, you see that each detail is crucial. And because each detail is crucial, it brings about the end of Mr. Haman, Mr. Haman himself, right? And he gets destroyed at the end. So you're going to say, so where was God? God was where he always was, right? But you see God in the background. Just because the book of Esther does not mention God's name doesn't mean he's not there, right? But you see by the details, how important every detail is. What are we going to say? We got 35 details. What are you going to say? Every detail is an interesting coincidence? I mean, how far do you do that? I know somebody that said 39 Scud missiles, in the time of the Gulf War, 39 Scud missiles hit Israel. These things are absolutely accurate. And they all hit areas where there was no people, right? And they didn't hit buildings, right? They hit empty fields, right? So what do you think? Either you tell me it's the stupidest person sending them. That could be. That very well could be, right? Or you got to tell me that something else is going on, right? Because, Iraq is not that far from Israel. If it's not that far, these things are unbelievably accurate, then what in the world's going on, right? So someone told me, he said, I can figure it out. Let me take out my calculator and figure it out. I said, 39 Scud missiles. You tell me, one hits an open area. Okay, coincidence. A second one, maybe another coincidence. When you get to like the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the 20th, how many times can you say coincidence? So the person said, yeah, it could happen. Maybe it's like 1 in a billion times. I'm like, 1 in a billion times? 1 in a billion times? That's a joke. If it was 1 in a billion times, are you going to put money down and say it's not going to happen? Never. Right? Because the odds are small, extremely small. No one's ever going to do that. But why does someone want to say, it could still happen 1 in a billion times? Because they don't want to admit God runs the world. They don't want to admit that there's miracles. They don't want to admit that I have obligations to do something. Nobody wants to admit that. Because if they do admit that, then they see, as we mentioned before, my life, God forbid, is a travesty of a mockery of a sham. And someone does not want to have to admit that 50 years, 60 years, however old they are, and say, what, I've been wasting my whole time? I've been wasting my whole life? How can that be? Right? I met somebody that's, 68 years old. This woman was learning Hebrew, was a Christian, and came up to this word, in the book of Isaiah about the Immaculate Conception, mistranslations, like what? I've been lied to? That was it. Right? That was it. She, she started learning, went through the conversion process, etc. But most people have been lied to, but they don't think about what they're going through. They don't think about what it means. They just say, what? I've had a lot of people tell me this, and say, what? The church's been lying to me for 50 years? Yes. As a matter of fact, because they don't have answers, right? So they tell you can't question, right? They tell you that you have to have faith, right? Gotta have faith, right? You're going to have faith over here. Yeah. But faith, it does not butter the biscuit, right? Because by the Jewish people, you look at Exodus chapter 20, at chapter 20, verse 1, it says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. God says, I'm the Lord your God. How do you know? Because he took you out of Egypt. It's not about a leap of faith. It's about faith with knowledge. That's where we learn the mitzvah of faith, belief in God, because he took us out of Egypt. Because God interferes in history. It's not about a leap of faith. You're going to say, how do I know that? How do I know God did that? Well, isn't there a mitzvah? Isn't there a mitzvah every year, father to tell the son the story of what happened in Egypt, i.e. by Passover coming up in 6 weeks, right? Put the fear of every woman, every Jewish woman up. Passover's coming, going to start cleaning, all that. But, usually there are 4 generations at a Passover Seder. There's a great-grandfather, grandfather, father, and a son, right? So let's say it's an 80-year difference between the great-grandfather and the youngest son. Imagine that great-grandfather at one time was the youngest son. So if he was the youngest son, he also saw his great-grandfather. So go back another 100 years, right? So every one of those 4 generations, you're going back more than 100 years. So you'd ask the question, giving the Torah Mount Sinai thousands of years ago. I don't relate to that. So let's talk about 4 generations at the Seder, right? You get in the Orthodox world, you could have that. You can certainly have that. If one of my grandkids gets married, my oldest one is 7, right? So give him another 15 years, right? So to speak, give him another 15 years, right? Let's say, he's 22, 23, he gets married. So I'm not going to be that old, right? In theory, I'll be less than 70, right? So if I'm less than 70, I'd be a great grandfather, right? So that's not out of the realm of reality, right? So now, how many of those generations do you need to go back to Mount Sinai? All you need is 80. But once you're already, let's say, you go back 2 of these Passover Seders, you're already back into the 1700s, right? You go back another few, you're already in the 1400s, 1500s. So that's not that big of a jump, right? You're in the time of Yosef Karo, really in the 1600s already, right? Rabbi Yosef Karo, what is his magnum opus, the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law? What's it based on? The Rambam, right? The Rambam was 400 years later, right? To go back another 2 Passover Seders, another 3, 4, right? So let's say you've gone back 8 Passover Seders. 8 Passover Seders, you're almost at the time of the Rambam. This is not a leap of faith, right? Everyone's been at a Passover Seder. Probably a lot of them were bad and boring, right? Just eat, rub it up, let's eat, and that's it. Okay, but if you look at it in those terms, right? You look at it in those generational terms, then that's not that far going back to Mount Sinai. So let's go, that's a leap of faith. I don't know. Why is that a leap of faith? If I got 4 generations at my table, right? And if I was a little kid and I saw my great grandfather go back 100 years, right? So now, so now you go back to the early 1900s, right? Late 1800s, right? So imagine that, my great grandfather also was a young kid. Go back another 90 years, right? So now you're about 1700, 1750, something like that. That's not a leap of faith. Those are facts on the ground, right? And not only that, but everybody, if you see a Passover Seder wherever you go, all things being equal, on the 15th of Nisan, what are we going to see? You're going to see 3 matzahs. You're going to see 4 cups of wine. You're going to see the cup of Elijah the prophet. You're going to see bitter herbs, or herbs, right? Depending where you're from. You're going to see, right? That's Morah. You're going to see Charoset. You're going to see what's going on, what's been passed down, right? Generation. So how can it be everyone doing the same thing, right? Even in the most, progressive or most quote-unquote open-minded till your brains fall on the floor, right? All these other groups of Judaism, they're also doing that to a great extent, right? But, you go way back when, it's all the same. How is it all the same? One event in history. Well, we got lucky. If I was in Madagascar, if I was in Saskatchewan, if I was in South America, if I was in Israel, that same day, everyone's doing more or less the same thing. All the same customs. That's not a leap of faith, right? That's not a leap of faith. So, back to what we were originally speaking about, believing in yourself to the day you die. Now, a point I didn't get to last week, and not going to necessarily harp on this, but there's an obligation. Remember, believing in yourself can also mean believing in my body, right? Fame, I'm going to live forever, right? We think our body's going to stay forever. Well, if you're over 40, your body changes, right? Can't eat the same. There are other things. Whether you're on steroids or not, doesn't matter, right? You're not the same athlete. Usually athletes already start to, they're already peaking in their mid-20s. By the time they hit 30, forget it. They're not, they're slowing down. Regardless whether they're taking steroids or not. By their mid-30s, take a picture, right? His arm's not the same. Right, certainly not going to be the same. Forget about Roger Clemens. I'll date myself. And all the guys are on steroids, and he won a Cy Young in his 40s. Okay, right? So that's not normal, right? That's not normal. But all things being equal, that shouldn't happen. So there is a mitzvah in the Torah, right? Nishmor es nafsho seichem. There's a mitzvah to guard our soul, right? But what does our soul mean? It means the body. Because if the body's not healthy, the soul can't function. The soul's in the body. When God says in the book of Genesis chapter 3, when God says that he breathed in the spirit of life, right? That means man could not exist without the soul. Man needs the soul to exist. Without the soul, it's not going to exist. The soul goes out of the body, the person dies. But if someone doesn't take care of the body, they're overweight, they don't exercise, in all this, then what's going to happen? The body will die, the soul will die, right? This is what's going to happen. This is biology 101, 101A. Now, a person could eat healthy, could also exercise, doesn't mean he can't get a dreaded disease, right? It's luck of the draw, quote unquote. If God wants you to be sick, it doesn't matter. A friend of mine once told me that, he knew someone ate extremely healthy, exercised, macrobiotic, the whole 9 years, the whole 9 yards, in the early 60s, got cancer and died, right? So even doing all that, so someone will say, isn't it true I should guard my body because you don't know what's going to be? Of course you don't know what's going to be, but there's a mitzvah to guard it. There's a mitzvah to take care of it, right? Exercise may be a four-letter word in some places, right? But in general, if you don't take care of the body, you can't learn as well, right? If you eat garbage, let's say a person eats, a lot of sugar. You have a sugar high. Imagine if I ate a lot of sugar, I'd kill everybody, right? You have a sugar high.
Caffeine and sugar, yeah.
You have a sugar high, then you go down, right? And then you go down, then you need more sugar, and it's bad, right? Definitely, sugar, even though, it's addictive and everything else, I'll tell you how bad it is. So, a person has to guard the body, right? And, especially when the body's healthy, right? Now, I would say if there are other things going on where a person potentially could spread disease, right? All the more so, we have to protect ourselves. We have to protect ourselves because our obligation is to protect others, right? We spoke quite a bit, and we're not going to go down this path, but I just mentioned, right? We spoke a lot about our obligation in order to not spread this pandemic, right? So people say, oh, the mask is a conspiracy, and the government this, and the vaccine that, and all that. Okay, some will argue for the mask, some will argue against the mask. The mask don't do anything. Regardless, why is the person wearing the mask? The only reason you're wearing the mask is not for yourself. You are protecting somebody else if the masks work. You are protecting somebody else from getting sick because they are more liable, right? In other words, they have reason that if they get sick, it could hinder them tremendously, could potentially kill them. So this has nothing to do with you, right? It also comes under the mitzvah, v'ahavta recha kamocha. I should love my fellow like myself, right? You certainly don't want to get sick, right? You certainly, a person goes to synagogue, you don't want someone coughing down your back. They don't cover their mouth and all that, right? Hygiene, also another four-letter word, could very well be, right? But, it's funny, I just saw an article recently. They said, hey, what happened to the flu? More people are more hygienic today because of this pandemic. The flu sort of disappeared, right? And how does the person get sick through the flu? Germs. That's how you get sick. This is biology 101A or B. So people aren't careful with that. They cough, they sneeze, nobody, whatever. And we got to think about somebody else. What are you going to tell me? Someone's got the sniffles or whatever. Isn't it obvious you should cover your mouth if you sneeze? 100%. Isn't it obvious you shouldn't breathe down someone's neck? 100%, because germs spread. And if germs spread and, and if someone's body's a little bit run down, they could get sick, right? Obviously, they could get sick. So why is this brought up over here? Because the reason a person can't rely on their own judgment, see, we have our own biases. People say, oh, I read all these, I read all these articles on the internet, so therefore, I'm not going to wear a mask. Big whoop. So what if you read a lot of articles? Go ask your doctor. Doesn't a doctor know a heck of a lot more than what they write on the internet? Probably. Right? So ask your doctor what to do. If he says, no, don't worry about it, you have to wear it, or you have to wear it, whatever the case is, but you can't rely on your own judgment. Why can't I rely on my own judgment?
Well, isn't that all we got, though, Rabbi?
We have our own biases. You have to research, right? 100% you have to do research. That's true. That is very true. But I would say in certain things, even if you're going to say, well, what else do we have? You're right. But, if you have a doubt, let's say it comes to money, right? If someone has a doubt what to do with money, aren't they gonna speak to an expert? Someone who knows what to do with money and how to invest. They're not gonna rely on their own judgment. They can say, "Oh, I read all these articles, right? I read all these internet. I looked at this, I looked at that." But there's something still nagging at you, right? There's something that say, "Well, should I invest money here or not?" You'll get a second opinion, right? If it's a lot of money, you get a second opinion, right? Because you don't want to just flippantly give money to someone and then, they run away with it. They misinvest it, or whatever.
Pensions have been disappearing and all kinds of
Right.
stuff.
It could be somebody, like in my case, the person was well trusted, did business with my father 25 years. He's a crook. In the end, he was a crook, right? So, you can't know something like that necessarily is going to happen, right? If God wants you to lose it, it can be lost, but when it comes to something like that and you're not sure. See, this is next week, next Shabbos, we're going to read the portion about Amalek, right? It's a week before Purim. So we're going to read this portion about Amalek, and we don't know, there's an obligation for Jews to destroy the memory of Amalek. Destroying the memory literally means if we know anyone who's Amalek, who's part of Amalek, we should go and kill them. Now, obviously, we're not going to be able to do that today, right? You go to jail otherwise. But the problem is, in general, we don't know who Amalek is, right? If you read in the book of Judges and you see what happened to Sancheriv before he got killed, he mixed up all the nations. Since he mixed up all the nations, nobody knows who Amalek is, right? Some say, and this is probably very true, that if you look at what the Germans did during World War II, in the absolute sheer cruelty, because what does it say by Amalek? By Amalek, it says they go after the ones behind, the little ones, right? The weak ones, right? In other words, they don't fight, they're a bunch of wusses in my language. They don't fight the strong. They don't fight against the army. They fight against the ones who can't defend themselves, right? So, isn't that what the Germans did? This is what they did. They destroyed thousands, millions of people, right? They destroyed, and they couldn't fight back. They had no way to fight back. Now, I mentioned this in my Q&A last week, that, and I'll mention here as well. If you look at history, you look at history. Now, I'm a student of history.
I know.
And my specialty was World War II. Now, you can argue. You can argue.
I could try.
You can argue with me. But if you look at what happened during World War II, right? You had one Jewish uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto, right? That's all you had, right? You had some Jews that escaped. They got out to the forest. They fought with the partisans. But interesting enough, most people are not aware. Who hunted down Jews to make sure they weren't in the forest? Amish. The Amish were in Germany before they came to America. Everybody loves the Amish. They're so quaint, right? They have their own customs. I was in Amish country. It's upstate Pennsylvania. And, I went there once and said, they've been using the same windmill for 300 years. And everyone's like, ooh, electricity, some use, some don't, this, that, whatever it is. But they were rabid anti-Semites, rabid, finding Jews in order to round them up. Most people are not aware of this. But let's call a spade a spade. What could the Jews have done at that time? Now, people in the JDL, Jewish Defense League, what do they always claim? What do they always scream out? Never again. We're not going to be like sheep that go to the slaughter. Well, that's great.
Again. Yeah.
Right. That is the great motto. We should defend ourselves. 100%. Sure. But I want to mention one thing, right? One thing over here. When the Germans came, and the Germans in Kristallnacht, right? 1939, right? In Kristallnacht. And they destroyed all these synagogues, right? Burned them to the ground, right? So, and then, there was anti-Semitism, Jews couldn't work, and all this, and then it started to snowball. By the time the rabbis certainly didn't realize this was going to happen. Otherwise, they would told people to leave. By the time people realized what was going on, all the borders are sealed. Not only that, they took away the businesses. They took people out in the middle of the night, with only the clothes they could barely carry. Families that put on cattle cars. By the time they realized what was going on, they're already killing thousands of millions of people.
Yep.
Right? Yep. So where are the weapons they're going to get? But not only that.
Yeah, pitchforks.
Right? Not only that, let's make clear. No, let's make clear. The ones that survived, what were they doing? They're working them like dogs. In the winter, in the summer, they worked them 12 hours a day. They didn't feed them, right? They barely fed them. Imagine what we were like after Yom Kippur. 27 hours, we haven't eaten, we haven't drank anything. We're extremely weak. So imagine getting a little bit of soup, no vegetables, and a dry, crusty piece of bread. And that's your ration for the day. Right now, if a person does that on a regular basis, after a while, you'll be delirious, right? How are you going to survive on that, right? The body can't function that way.
Nope.
Even if you want to tell me, forget about the borders, forget about anything else. They didn't have the power. They didn't have the strength. The only people that had the strength to really fight back, right, are people that fled. That was it. Even if they would have had an uprising, let's say. First of all, even if they would have killed a few Germans here and there, they would all get slaughtered, right? 100% they would have got slaughtered. But what were they supposed to do? The most difficult thing for them was to get out of the country. Any country, forget about Germany. Get out of Poland, get out of Hungary, get out of all these places. Where they were trapped like rats, right? So anyone who wants to make the claim that, they should have fought, and if I would have been there, I would have done this, I would have done that, you're an idiot. You're an absolute idiot because you don't know anything about history, right? How in the world could they have left? If they were Muslim today, they would have done all kinds of things.
Yeah, overwhelmed.
They don't care about life, right? But they don't care about, any quality of life, so they'll die anyway. That doesn't matter. But when you're being starved to death, sadly, with a combination, you don't know what's going to bring tomorrow and what's going to happen. You're trying to survive. You're not thinking about uprising. But not only that, you can't get out. It's a combination. The borders are shut and you're physically weak. If the borders are shut and physically weak, where's the huge Jewish army in Germany, in Poland, in all these places? Where's the army? Show me, where's the army going to be to make an insurrection? They made an insurrection, okay? They did that in the Warsaw Ghetto. What happened with that? They all died, right? They all got burned to a crisp, right? They got destroyed. Yeah, if it would have happened, they would have known, they would have seen, different things. There was total bewilderment for so long. And once they found out what was really going on, took them time to find that out. But once they found that out, what in the world were they supposed to do? See, this is the power. We'll tie this into Purim, because this is the power of Amalek. Amalek preys on the weak. That's what they do, right? They in no way, shape, or form, except after God gave the Torah. After God gave the Torah, Amalek strikes. Moshe Rabbeinu has to get people together to fight against him, but that also doesn't make any logical sense. First of all, the Jewish people didn't have an army, right? At that point, they didn't know how to fight. They certainly didn't know how to fight. But not only that, but the Jews had totally decimated the Egyptians. They're on the biggest roll of their lives. Why in the world would Amalek come and fight, right? So there's a parable. The parable is, a person jumps in to a boiling hot bath, right? Cauldron. Thing is 150,000 degrees. What's going to happen when he jumps in? He's going to get burnt. He's going to die. What's going to happen when the second person jumps in? Same thing. What's going to happen to the third person? Same thing. What's going to happen to the 250th person? It's going to cool down, right? And once it cools down, then we can fight against them. But again, logically, because of what the Jews were doing and how successful they were, right? What happened in Egypt and all that, doesn't make sense, that they're going to want to fight against them. But even so, what's even worse? What's even worse than just the pure power, right? And the pure anger that they have against, the Jewish people, and the cruelty, right, that they'll use against the Jewish people, is what they brought to the world was doubt. They brought to the world there's no such thing as supernatural, right? In other words, God doesn't exist. Stuff happens. If I can't see anything beyond that, right, just like Aristotle said, doesn't exist.
The natural.
Right? But what happened to Mr. Haman? What happened to him in the end? In the end, Esther says, she brings him to a party with Achashverosh, and she says, my people have been sold down the river. Someone wants to destroy my people. Now you have to understand, when she won the beauty pageant and Achashverosh chose her, Mordechai tells her, do not tell Achashverosh where I come from. He tells her, don't say that you're Jewish. Now, Achashverosh did all kinds of things. The Talmud tells us, did all kinds of things, try to get her to reveal where she came from. And she refuses to tell, right? Because that's one of the first questions. A person's dating somebody. The first question is going to ask,
where are you from?
What do you do? What do you do?
What do you do?
The second question will be, where you're from, right? That'll be the second question. So I remember when I met my wife, and that was the question, where you're from. So I grew up in Philadelphia. My father's from Jamaica. So, so I said, oh, Jamaica, New York. It's like, no, like Jamaica, the island. Like Jamaica, like Yaman, Jamaica. So my obvious next question was,
Caribbean,
is he white or black? So someone said, you really asked that? I said, of course, I'm still married 28 years later. I didn't say it as a racist thing, right? But it was, sort of like either an icebreaker or what they would say is you get clonked on the head with a hammer, right? But without to digress over here, right? So now she points to Haman. So Achashverosh goes out, they're chopping down his beautiful flowers, all these angels come chopping down the forest, and Charvona is known as Eliyahu Navi, Elijah the prophet. First time an angel ever told Elijah, said, oh, Haman told us to do it. So what happens? Achashverosh comes running back in. What does he see? Haman is perched on Esther's couch, Esther's bed. He's begging for his life. Now at this point, Achashverosh still doesn't want to kill him. So what does Achashverosh say? He says, what are you doing? He says, you scoundrel, what are you doing? You're on my wife's bed. You're going to take the queen in front of my face? Right, that's what you're going to do now. God opens up, the Talmud says, God opens up Haman's eyes, and he sees angels. Right now, if he's being pinned down by angels. If he's being pinned down by angels, how in the world can he tell Achashverosh, look, they're angels. God opened my eyes. I see angels over here. What would Achashverosh say? He says, you idiot. Of course I'm not going to believe you. You're Amalek. Right? Amalek does not believe in supernatural. Right? How does he come from Amalek? Right? Remember, there was a command in Samuel 1, chapter 15, that Samuel the prophet gives the command to King Saul to wipe out Amalek. And who does he leave alive? He leaves the king, and he leaves flocks alive. Right? So what happens? He leaves the king alive. The king.
You mean leave the children too?
So it could be the children also. Right? He leaves the king alive at least. Right? Everyone else seems to be slaughtered. And the king shacks up with someone, and eventually that offspring comes to Haman. Right? Haman is an offspring of the king of Amalek. That's how he ends up, as an Amalekite. So over here, Mr. Haman himself is killed by his own belief system, right? Because he cannot say this is supernatural. Because if he says it's supernatural, Amalek does not believe in the supernatural. And that's the world we live in. We live in a Greek world, right? Worship of the body, 100%. Education is all from the Greeks, right? Even though we only have a few trinkets of them left, right? A few architectural things or whatever. But we're living in that type of world, right? Because the decree against Jewish people in the time of Hanukkah was not just, they made certain decrees against them. But what they wanted was that the Jews become like them. Go to their gymnasiums, go to their sporting events. Hey, watch the Super Bowl. Why not? Everyone else is watching it. World Cup, all these things. Be like us, right? And that's 10 times worse. 10 times worse. So now, what did Amalek bring to the world? They brought this idea of cynicism about God. Cynicism about anything spiritual, right? If you take the word, if you take the last two letters of Amalek, one second, Amalek and Bilam, right? Amalek and Bilam, I think you get the word. I think I messed that up, but whatever it is, he brought doubt to the world, right? He absolutely brought doubt to the world. By bringing doubt to the world, we're living in a godless world, right? That's essentially the world we're living in. You look in the Western world, you have your tens of thousands of Bible thumpers, Christians, whatever. You have other people, worshiping idols, etc. But essentially in the Western world, In the Western world, what do I have? What I have is I have cynicism about religion, right? That is what you have, and that is, that is the scary part, of what they've done. So someone will ask, okay, there's a mitzvah to wipe out Amalek. We don't know who they are. You're right. We don't know who they are, so we can't kill anybody, right? Regardless of that, it's what they brought to the world, right? So when a person hears those verses in synagogue, if you go to synagogue, you hear those verses about Amalek, what should I be thinking of? I should be thinking about that I should never have any doubts that God runs the world. I should have no doubts that God's the one in charge, that he's the one controlling everything, regardless if I understand it or not, right? But to fall into Amalek's trap, you say, a person will say, well, ain din ve'ain dayan, right? There's no judgment. God forbid there's no judge. Because we're living in this world of hiddenness within hiddenness, and they can actually say, look, see, there is no God. See, there is no supernatural. Stuff happens. You're born at the wrong time. Wrong time, wrong place. All these different things. That's what they brought to the world, and that's why it's bad, and that's why we have an obligation, to wipe that mentality out. Yeah, question.
Well, Rabbi, I'm of the opinion, I get what you're saying about Amalek and what they brought to the world in a negative light, that doubt or disbelief or just, but I am of the opinion, and I can't seem to gel 100%, especially with a lot of rabbis, even though we get along great and I'm learning so much. I am of the opinion that for the Messianic era to really go into full blossom, to that point where people beat their swords into plowshares, spears into pruning hooks, and learn war no more, till we get past all that, to get to that stage, there has to be a point of global understanding of the reality of Torah. And I believe that comes in its actuality.
Survey says, and the reason is because that's only going to happen after the Messiah comes. Now, once the Messiah comes, right? Once the Messiah comes, who's going to announce the coming of the Messiah? Is going to be Elijah the prophet, right? That's only what the prophets tell us. So when the Messiah comes, everyone's going to agree. Everyone's going to understand he is the Messiah, and then they try and figure out how to kill him. Right? But that knowledge of godliness in the world, right, seemingly is only going to be then. And then the only question is who's going to survive, that final war. Because there are two opinions.
Well, I'm talking past all that.
No, 1 second. The Talmud says that the Messiah can come in two ways. Either everyone's going to be doing the right thing, right? Everyone's going to have this knowledge of God. Everyone will be doing the right thing. Or God forbid that God would put up a king like Haman. Everyone's going to repent because they're terrified. Could be, you have somebody, let's say someone Iran or whatever, try to take over the world, and all that. And then the Messiah can come that way. Either we're all meritorious or we're the other way, right? But you definitely don't see right now. I don't think there's any question about it. You don't see that the entire world is playing their guitar singing Kumbaya. That's not happening. We don't see that. We're not even close. Right? We don't that well. We are.
Well, I realize there's a long way to go.
It is only a matter of time with the next 200 years that the Messiah is going to come, and seemingly he's knocking on the door. Regardless of all that, you're 100% right. There will be a universal knowledge. Everyone is going to recognize. Everyone's going to recognize that, even if it's brought down that all these
establishment of the validity.
Non-Jews are going to come out of the woodwork, and pull on a Jew's tzitzis and say, "Teach me Torah." Okay, there are people like that coming out of the woodwork, but we're not even close. We're not even close to that. If you were to tell me, how many 3-4 billion people in the world, if you told me even if there were a billion, if there were a third of the world, that were Noahides, this world would look totally different. I'm talking a third of the entire world. We're not close to that. How many Noahides exist in the world? 20,000, 50,000, if that. Maybe there's more, right? Maybe there's more, right? But they're not coming out of the woodwork, in exponential numbers. We're all singing Kumbaya. That is not the case, right? That is only going to be when the Messiah comes, and it's clear as day. that he is the Messiah, everyone's going to recognize it. That's a whole different story. We're not there yet, right? Again, we're close. I think we're further away in other ways, but when that's going to happen, there's going to be a universal recognition. One thing you have to keep in mind also, as the Vilna Gaon says, Rav Elijah Vilna says in his book Evan Shlema, the Vilna Gaon says in order for the Messiah to come, the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, has to be wiped out. Now, who is the mixed multitude? Mixed multitude, he says, are Jews that are in charge of all kinds of different organizations, right? They're basically heretics, right? Most people in the Israeli government certainly fit that bill. Most people in most Jewish organizations, secular Jewish organizations, fit that bill. They all have to die out, the Vilna Gaon says, before the Messiah can come. So, again, I think we're close. I don't think there's any question about that. When it's going to happen and how it's going to manifest itself, nobody knows, right? But, at the end of the day, there has to be a universal recognition, right? A universal recognition of one God in the world, etc. And we're not there, right? We're 100%, we're not there, right? Even if you tell me there are 100,000 Noahites, doesn't matter. We're still not there, right? There is an idea. There is an idea.
I understand the point.
Someone has said that if there be more Noahites out there, anti-Semitism would go down, right? Or they claim the anti-Semitism will disappear. And that can't happen because anti-Semitism started with Esav and Yaakov, and it's going to continue to the end of days till the Messiah comes. That's never going to stop until the Messiah comes. But I would agree, if there are all these Noahites out there, all these Noahites who want to keep whatever they need to keep, etc., that will make an impression in the world. I don't think there's any question about that, but that's not going to stop anti-Semitism, right? That 100% is not going to stop anti-Semitism, right? So now, the reason now, you mentioned before, right? You said, but we only have our own judgment, right? We only have our own judgment over here. Well, why can't you rely on your own judgment in general? Because the evil inclination comes and traps us, weakens us, looks for more ways to get us to go off the straight and narrow path, right? I don't think there's anything more, in recent history that has split people, into different camps more than this pandemic. And the reason is you got the anti-vaxxers on one side. Again, I'm not going to, spend the whole time speaking about this. You got the anti-vaxxers on one side. You got the people who say you should get it. And you have people that, for masks or against masks, right? Now, all sides, let's say have legitimate claims, right? But, there's so many stories out there, families being broken up because, this person believes in getting vaccinated and other people, and someone else doesn't, and there are fights and there are arguments and you can say, well, there's socialism, there's communism, there's, there's other things. But what's going on today is just like either you're on one side or the other. That's what some explain, that when the Messiah comes or when he's supposed to come, you're going to have either, a generation that's doing the right thing and the wrong thing, right? You're going to have two sides, right? You're going to have either one side that fights against God and the other side that's with God, right? That's even what we have today, right? That is what we have today. Either you're a leftist, I can do whatever I want. God can go, God can go to hell. Doesn't really matter. We don't really believe in him and all that. And you got the other side that's very staunch, right? But, but again, what does the evil inclination do? The evil inclination plays with our minds, right? And, as I always tell people, part of my job, whether it's with Noahides, whether it's JITs, Jews in training, or other Jews, is to get to think and understand what it means to be a Jew. Right? How to look in the Torah and view what's going on and how to see current events. Now, it's not always so easy, right? My Rabbi will say, forget about it. Just do what you have to do. You have to sit and learn, right? That's your obligation. Let God run the world because in 10 lifetimes, you're never going to understand it anyway. Even if you're happy 95% of the time, doesn't matter, right? It's totally irrelevant. So therefore, the evil inclination, what does it do? Clouds our judgment. Absolutely clouds our judgment. There, and again, some people say, I know for sure you shouldn't do this. Other people say, no, you should do it. And both have different ways of looking at things. So how can both be right? They can't be right, right? Either you tell me, well, maybe one side is right, they just don't have, the information will prove it later. Or the other side will say you don't have enough information. Or, whatever. But the fact that it's such a polarizing thing, right? Again, without getting into politics, that's what you saw by the election. That's what you saw by the last American election. Absolute polarization, right? Either on one side or the other. And there are contradictions all over the place, right? Which we're not even going to get into. But the evil inclination convinces us of things. It doesn't have to make sense, right? It absolutely doesn't have to make sense. I'll give an example.
I wish it did.
I'll give another example. Not that I am a, conspiracy theorist or whatever, whatever it is. I do remember the night of the election. I was in the middle of giving a class. So after class finished, so they kept coming up different states. They kept pushing different states. These different what do you call it? TV stations or whatever. Okay, in this state, okay, there's a 2% difference, a 4% difference, or this, that. And in one state, it was interesting. If you saw it come up, you said, okay, this one has a certain number of votes. This one has a certain number of votes. And then 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, if you were really paying attention, you notice somebody lost votes in real time, right? Real time. Now, in general, from these machines, they're putting up the votes, right? The votes shouldn't go down. They should go up. This is exactly what's supposed to happen.
It's like a river turning backwards. It should go
up. It shouldn't go. It doesn't matter how much it goes up. It goes up 1,000, goes up 500, goes up 900. Somebody should not be losing votes. How do you have a miscalculation if it's computerized? Okay, I'm not going to get into conspiracy theory, right? But, that's in real time. That's in real time. How do you explain that? Oh, there was a glitch. Never seen anything like it in my life. That'll never, ever happen normally. Normally, it's never going to happen, right? So what can happen? Oh, that's not evidence. That's nothing, right? Oh, 50,000 people gave testimony irregularity. No, that's not testimony. That's not nothing. Look, all the lawsuits got thrown out. Yeah, because they didn't look at the material. Okay, without getting into all that, person wants to see what they want to see, right? But, how many people can be lying over here? How many affidavits did people go to jail for perjury, right? So the evil inclination can say, no, we just hate this other person. I'm not going to mention him by name. We hate this other person. We want him out of power. And that's it. We don't care. And if there are irregularities, there are irregularities. Big deal. So over here, what does the evil inclination do? We have a certain agenda. We want to go according to that certain agenda. And that evil inclination just brings, quote unquote, more evidence to support the agenda, right? But the problem is, it's based on a travesty of a mockery of a sham, right? It's like trying to sustain a three-legged chair. Person who wants to do that, go ahead and try it. Three-legged chair is not going to stand, right? The lie will just keep on going and keep on being perpetuated. One example, right? Use another more relevant example, and that is by the so-called idea, without getting into politics, the so-called Palestinian people. They don't exist. There's no such thing. Mark Twain came in the late 1800s. There wasn't a Palestinian entity in Israel. There was nobody here. There was barely anybody here. The students of the Vilna Gaon came and drained the swamps. A lot of them died of malaria. There weren't anybody here. That's exactly what the prophet said. It was flattened like an absolute pancake. So we're all the Palestinians. Where's this entire nation? And when the Ottomans were there, when the English were there, where were this nation? Said, hey, what are you doing in our land? They weren't there. They were Lebanese. They were Jordanians. All these different groups. Who made the Palestinian people? The Israelis did, right? The UN helped them, put them in camps and all this. That's how it started, right? So why is it everyone in academia, and all the newspapers, all over the internet, they're still going through the same lie, right? They're still perpetuating the same lie.
It's a story. It's a narrative.
It's a story, but guess what? I studied history. History is his story. But you got to check out the facts. What do you think? Mark Twain is a lover of Jews? I don't think so. He was just saying, this is what I saw. No one disputes. No one says Mark Twain, or as he was called, Samuel Langhorne Clemens, right? Nobody claims he was a fruitcake. Nobody says he was a Jew lover. Nobody says that. They say this is what he said. They have his writing, what he said. So if that's what he said, and there was nobody here at the end of the 1800s, the late 1800s. So what happened? 40 years later, right? 50 years later, all of a sudden, there was a Palestinian group. You got to give it to the Arabs. Which Arabs? Who are we giving it to? Right? Even by, that first partition plan. But who was it given to? They didn't exist before. Where'd they come from? Right? Why are they perpetuating the same lie? Because they don't want to give Jews credibility to the land. They want to say, you don't know the land. It's like they were here first. Wouldn't I say, in general, someone who's a bully, and he's like, give me 25 cents or I'm going to beat you up, right? So what do you call that? Protection money, right? Now, if you could beat him up, don't you think you're not giving him your 25 cents? 100%. You're not giving him your 25%. Sorry, 25 cents over here. We would say, okay, you guys want the land back so bad. You think it belongs to you? Come take it. You can say, oh, you have nuclear weapons. You have the strongest army in the Middle East. It's not my problem, right? The fact that the Jews exist in Israel, absolute miracle. Nothing to talk about. But, might makes right over here. We defended ourselves. We got the land, right? We took over the West Bank. Who gives land back? Nobody. Never happened. Right? I saw a good cartoon many years ago. They said for Israel to give land back to the Arabs, first America has to give California, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas to the Mexicans. They have to give back Florida to Spain, and they have to give all the rest of the land back they stole to the Indians. And after that, then we'll speak about peace, right? But the only thing in recent history, right? If anyone knows anything about history, when's the only time there's ever been a population exchange, right? In the 70s, there was a population exchange between who? Pakistan and India. That's it, right? They've had disputed lands, for years. Still never been decided. But whoever gives back land in a defensive war? Nobody. Not only that, we've been condemned in the UN more than anybody else combined, right? And we're 1/1000 of the world's population. So all that doesn't make sense, right? For one strip of land that's no bigger than the size of the state of New Jersey, without getting to politics, right? No, but nobody in the right mind is going to say, well, we have to give it up. Doesn't make sense, right? So there are plenty of other Arab lands. So let them deal with, all their other lands. How are they making claim over here? But it's a lie, an absolute lie. It's been perpetuated. So the question would be, why can't they look in the same information I know? Why in the world can't they do that? They could. They absolutely could. What's the problem? Not politically correct. They are blinded, right? Because obviously, who looks bad? Poor Israelis, right? And you make a claim. Schwarzenegger will call him out over here if he's going to listen, because he probably won't. Makes a claim that the Capitol riots were similar to Kristallnacht. Are you serious? They burnt down the Capitol? Come on. This was premeditated against one group? That we call racist, you idiot, right? That's absolutely racist. All these synagogues destroyed, Jews thrown in the streets, they can't work. You want to compare the riots to that? I don't know. People will use a lot of imagery comparing the Holocaust to things that never, ever should compare to. You got these stupid representatives, these Arabs, in America comparing, what happened in during World War II to what we're doing to the Arabs. Or what they'll say, it's like apartheid. Do you know anything? Obviously I understand why you're rewriting history, right? It makes sense because you're an Arab. Why you're rewriting history. But that's not the right history. That's not what happened. And the Arabs would be very happy, living under us and living under any other Arab country. I don't think there's any question about that. Treated much more humanely. You interview most people if they weren't afraid to be killed, right? 100% they would admit it freely, right? So again, Using that as an example without getting into politics, right? Using that as an example. Why? How in the world can everyone still drink the same Kool-Aid, right? The same thing, and same thing with what do you call it? With evolution, right? It's either evolution or the Bible, and you can't say evolution isn't true and the Bible is. We'll find the missing link, okay? Maybe another 150,000 years, maybe you find it. Probably not, right? But that lie's also been perpetuated all over. Right? This is what it means. Person can't rely on your own judgment. Do the research. Don't believe what some crummy professor, spoon feeds you. Do the research. See if it's true. Right? Before you start saying, oh, Judaism's against women, Judaism's against this, do the research. See if it's actually true. I'm not interested in what your world outlook is. I want to know, did God speak at Mount Sinai? Did he give Torah to the Jewish people? Did he not give Torah to the Jewish people? Don't tell me what your world outlook is if you can't prove that. Or you can't answer that question. Because your world outlook is based on nothing. It's based on what the Western world says. And in my language, we don't give a hoot what the Western world says. Right? We don't care what the Arabs say. We care what anybody says. We care what God says. We care what the Torah says. We care how it's passed down. We care about integrity. We care about oral law. You want to show me where oral law is problematic? You want to show, we can't listen to rabbis. Listen, Mrs. Checkmate out there. Show me, give me answers in the Torah that you can't answer without oral law. Right? You can't do that. Right? So you have no other answers. So if you have no other answers, find me one. Right? I have an answer for Ruth. Right? For King David. Right? And Ruth cannot convert according to the Torah. If Ruth can't convert, how is King David Jewish? How is the future Messiah Jewish? Even according to Christians, right? They have different lines to King David. But even for them, isn't JC related to King David? Oh, but JC was Jewish also. Check, mate. I have an answer, right? My answer is according to oral law. Oh, I don't hold by oral law. And the rabbis made it up. And the rabbis is, okay, fine.
Oh, that's beautiful, Rabbi. Yeah.
Give me an answer. Show me in the Torah. Show me in the prophets. Show me in the writings where any of that is true. There is no answer. The Torah makes clear. The Karaites will be whistling Dixie over here. They'll bow down to my name because they're going to say, you can't convert. A Moabite can't convert. If a Moabite can't convert, Ruth isn't Jewish. How'd she marry the greatest person in that generation, Boaz, if she's not Jewish? How can King David be Jewish? Can't. Right? So why are some people going to still drink that Kool-Aid? Again, they have an agenda. Right? Just like the Christians trying to prove in all kinds of different texts. They have an agenda. JC wasn't around. It was 600 years later. It was before. Doesn't go for him. Right? It's not relating to him at all. Doesn't matter. You guys are the ones who are backwards. But why do you keep trying to find explanations in the prophets, in the writings, even in the Torah that don't say what you say they say? Right? In other words, you're bringing extrapolations from who knows where. You say, well, the rabbis do that. Yeah, but there's a mitzvah to listen to the rabbis. Right? You're bringing extrapolations from where? You're proving from where? From your sources, quote unquote, that have no validity, that have holes in them, that have mistakes. Torah doesn't have mistakes. Right? You want to find a mistake in the Torah? Show me. Show me where the mistake is. That it's not true. That it didn't happen. That this is what it means. Show me. Right? That's what you have to do. But every single time I keep hearing and seeing the same thing over and over. No, it's like this. It's a hint. It's what? Wait, don't tell me it's a hint. Don't tell me it's a hint. Show me. Show me in the verses themselves that this is what it means. Right? In other words, if the Torah says just one example, if the Torah says that you cannot give your child over to Molech, Molech was an idol, right? So one definition of Molech was they threw kids in the fire before the idol. That's called an abomination. That's called human sacrifice. Torah says clear, human sacrifice is forbidden. So where do you see someone came down to this world, sacrificed himself for God? Where do you see that? This is a clear proof that's an abomination.
Wow.
Right? In other words, they're grasping for straws to prove their points. right? That's what they're doing. That's what it is.
A lot of people do.
That's what it is. It's extrapolation.
That's how
right?
cognitive dissonance works.
That's exactly what it is, because they have a point they want to prove, right? Just like we mentioned by Stephen Hawking and by Einstein, who both agreed you can never look at the Bible as true, but they didn't have any evidence to prove scientifically how do you explain an expanding universe, right? Not scientifically, not mathematically, right? Mathematically, it does show that there's an expanding universe and all that, but they don't know where it comes from, right? They can't explain where it comes from.
No,
right. So give me a mathematical explanation. Give me a scientific explanation. Give me something that explains it in your terms. We can't. We don't have any,
theoretical.
We haven't been able to prove it.
Best,
so what's the other alternative? There's only one other alternative. There are two alternatives. One alternative is evolution. That's one alternative, which all of academia basically believes in. Or you have the Bible, or you have the Torah. It's one or the other.
I don't see them at odds, though.
I don't have anything else. But you can't say no rational thinking person should ever believe in it. Well, what are my alternatives? A rational person should believe in evolution? So many things about it don't make any sense. Not only that, it certainly hasn't been proven in any way, shape, or form. Right? So there are a lot of examples. You'll be here for the next 3 hours.
I don't have that dichotomy.
There are more and more examples all over the place to show that people have cognitive dissonance. They just won't listen to reality. They won't. They say, "Oh, you're a fanatic and this and that." You're right. I'm a fanatic. Answer my question. Answer my question. Is this true or it's not true? Don't tell me but. Don't give me Webster's fifth definition. Give me an answer, either one way or the other. Comes along with Chaim Brisker. Chaim Brisker, famous son of the Beis HaLevi, Torah giants more than 150 years ago. And he says there's a mitzvah we were speaking about before you got me off topic here. Jeez, I did to myself, no worry. That's the Torah tells me I have to guard myself. Right? So we spoke about that by wearing masks and not wearing masks, whatever. Now, what does this really mean? What does it mean I have to guard myself? Says Rav Chaim Brisker, there's a hint over here about my belief in God, about having proper faith and belief in God. Because anything that takes a person away from proper service to God, i.e., any doubts a person has or may have, they should stay away from it. Why? Because belief in God and faith in God is the absolute foundation of Judaism. And a person's Torah mitzvahs won't guard them to prevent this damage. So we'll tell a famous story. There's a famous story with a student of the Baal Tanya, the one who wrote the Tanya, first Lubavitcher Rabbi, who wrote the Tanya, and he had a student, and this student wanted to go to university. So the Baal Tanya told him, if you go to university, there's a lot of heresy there. You got to be very careful. It could take you off the straight and narrow path, etc. of keeping what God wants. So the student answered back and said, "Listen, I've been learning in your study hall for years. Learning in your study hall for years did not make me so righteous. If learning in your study hall didn't make me so righteous, then if I learn from these people, that may have a negative impression, might make a negative impression on me, all this heresy, who says I'm going to listen to them? Right? If I didn't become so righteous by you, I'm not going to be so bad by them." Right? That's what the student told him. So the Baal Tanya answered, he said, "You're making a big mistake." He said, "You're making a big mistake." Why? Because impurity, how does a person become impure? According to the Torah, all I have to do is touch a dead animal. Right? Time in the temple, touch a dead animal, a person becomes impure automatically. Right? Just by touch. Right? Go to university, right? That's what it's going to be. Impurity is only by touch. You want to become righteous? You want to live a righteous life? You think just learning in my study hall is going to make you righteous? It's something you got to work on. Something you got to work on for a long time, right? In order to be righteous. So that being the case, you want to go off and you want to learn X, Y, and Z, you want to go to a secular place, they're going to have a tremendous effect on you. The only way you're able to do that, you have to stay very, very strong. You have to make all kinds of boundaries, right? All kinds of boundaries to make sure that you're going to stay on the straight and narrow path. And there are plenty of things a person can learn that are totally heretical, right? And if a person, is, let's say they're sheltered, they haven't heard these other things before. All of a sudden, they start hearing about evolution. They start hearing about other religions, other things. All of a sudden, the whole world that opens up. Say, wow, I never knew this. I never heard about this. This is so interesting. So you're gonna say, well, what about his faith? What about his belief? Right? Anyone watch the movie The Chosen? Right? What does he do? Cuts off his payas, cuts down his payas, doesn't wear a long coat anymore. He was Hasidic, right? Goes to university. Right? He goes to university. It's like a tragedy, in many ways. Because now what you're doing is you're doing whatever it takes to try and fit in. Right? So now there are many things that would go against our beliefs. And a person can fight against them, that's true. But you have to set up boundaries. Right? The only way a person, even if you have to get a degree or anything else, a person has to always have fixed times for learning. Certainly if you're a guy, you have to work hard on staying on the straight and narrow path. Because if you don't do that, the garbage seeps in. That's just what happens. It happens by osmosis, right? All these people in your class. I mean, most people doing things virtually now, right? In a lot of ways, but you have Jews, you have secular Jews, you have non-Jews, in these classes, and what are they doing? They're just going about life, and a person will hear things A, they should never hear, B, things that never come up in conversation, etc. And if you don't have boundaries, that's gonna affect you in a majorly negative way. You're gonna say a person can't handle that, then their faith is weak. Yeah, a person's faith you always have to work on, right? We're living in a very dark world, right? We're living in a world of Hester b'toch Hester panim. God's hidden within hiddenness. That's all true. But if you're throwing information, you don't know how to deal with it. A lot of these kids are not, they're not rocket scientists over here. It's not like,
Badly.
It's not like they're going in. They've learned all the Talmud, they've learned all the commentaries. They're holding at a different level. It's totally different, right? Not even close to that. So therefore, a person has to be careful, right? A person has to make boundaries. If you don't do that, then this stuff can seep in. It can cause a person to question, right? And that's why so many people way back when, got into, socialism, communism. How did they start off that way? Didn't happen by osmosis. How'd they start off that way? He started reading things. He started reading things that were forbidden to read, even in the bathroom.
Well, yeah, when they have to choose between two evils too, rather than
okay.
the
But
Torah.
what I'm saying that this is what happens. We mentioned by Elisha ben Abuya, right? He started reading all kinds of philosophy and it cracked him, right? It messed him up, messed up his mind. And eventually became a heretic, right? So many things, out there today, as good and strong as we may be, once there's, what we mentioned earlier, once there's a little hole in the armor, it's all the evil inclination wants. And a lot of stuff out there is interesting, right? We're not going to say not, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned last week, I know of somebody that, teenage years that, was listening to the radio, and what did he get hooked into? He got hooked into Howard Stern, right? Howard Stern, I wouldn't say is the, the bastion of modesty, in any way, shape, or form. But that's how it started, right? And then, there's a spiral effect. There's an absolute spiral effect. So people say, what? I have to really be insular. I can't look at the news. I can't look at this. First of all, a lot of the news is Lashon Hara, right? It's always speaking badly against others. Listen to sports talk radio. That's all it is in general. So you're listening to negative things, right? Negative things do have effect on us, no question. Watching things we shouldn't see also have a negative effect. But again, these things, it doesn't mean tomorrow a person's going to be a heretic. right? I don't think it doesn't happen that fast.
Right. Just because things exist out there doesn't mean we're obliged to own them. The negative things,
No,
in other
100%.
words.
When I was in camp many years ago, someone, fellow camper once said, you have to experience everything once. So I was like 15. At the time I said, well, I don't necessarily think that's true. And they said, what do you mean? So I said, well, if I know an experience is going to be bad for me, it's going to have negative effects, then why should I do it? So I said, if I wanted to, it's a bad idea, right? But if I wanted to, I could go outside the bunk. I could take 60 steps backwards, and then I could run as fast as I can into the bunk wall, right? Now, if I do that, I'll probably break almost every bone in my body if I'm lucky, right? And probably blood will be gushing all over the place. And we understand that's a bad thing, right? That's a bad thing.
Sounds like most of my life, Rabbi.
Right. So I would say you don't have to bang your head against the wall till it bleeds to know it's bad, right? Say, oh, you're so close-minded. I know what's out in the world, right? But there are things that have been seen or done or whatever that can have a negative effect, and that could be a negative effect for a long time, right? So, thinking certain things doesn't mean it's good. Reading certain things, you'll say, like, what's the big deal? So what? So what if you read Harry Potter? So what if you saw the
studying
movie?
the whole of a matter.
You saw all the movies, or you saw this, you saw that. Most of the values in all these things are bad, right? Tom and Jerry, pretty bad values in a lot of ways. Rabbi,
I watched one last week because you mentioned it. I watched one the other day. It's on MeTV, which is Memorable Entertainment out of Chicago. I watched one with my wife. My wife said, oh, Tom and Jerry turned on. I was having a morning coffee, and so I checked it out. And there it was. He was playing a cowboy. Tom the cat was playing a cowboy, and there he is rolling a cigarette and smoking right on TV. It just goes to show you how ethical they were.
You know what they say? Once you start analyzing cartoons, you can't watch them anymore. I remember watching a rerun of the Flintstones, and they had a volunteer fire department, but it's all made out of bedrock. How can they have a volunteer fire department? Nothing burns. It's bedrock, right? So I said, if you start asking questions, you can't watch anymore, right? But a lot of these things, they just have bad values.
Yes.
A lot of, there might be some good values in there, but in general, they're all bad values. It's violence.
Simpler
it's
times.
funny. It's enjoyable. No question about it, right? But the values are bad. The values are bad. So over here, what is Rav Chaim Brisker telling you? He's telling you that you have to be very, very careful of what you see, of what you do, because anything that stops you from the proper service of God, anything that could lead you to doubts should be forbidden. Right? And even if a person has to do it, you have to have the proper perspective. Right? And if you don't have the proper perspective, then it's very easy for a person to go sour. Right? Yeah, in other words, you have to have proper boundaries. You have to, you have to learn, books of Jewish philosophy to get you through, because if not, if you don't have ways to answer, and now all of a sudden you're starting to have doubts. By having doubts, the worst thing can happen, right? So now also, a person may not have the strength to stand up against the elements of the streets. The street's very powerful. No question about it. They can take a person on a path they don't want to go, right? Innocent things. We're not saying something major. All a person needs to do, right? As you mentioned by Tom rolling a cigarette. A person tries a cigarette, he enjoys it. He can be addicted, for a long time. One cigarette. What can one cigarette do? Well, what do you think they put? They put nicotine in. That's the whole point. It's addictive. A person experiments with certain things, right? They, say, oh, no, it's going to expand my mind. It's going to this. It's going to have a negative effect, right? You do not, to the best of your ability, want to travel off the beaten track, right? Now, again, we have ups, we have downs, we do things we shouldn't do, things we shouldn't think about, all these things. But in the end, if a person's really working on themselves, then they'll continue on the right path. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that it can spiral. right? That's why it's crucial, as we said, before, way back when, at the beginning of this Mishnah, don't separate yourself from the community, right? In other words, that you have to be part of the general religious populace, where they live in a strong Jewish community, have similar values, in order to keep these elements out. Now, in all Jewish communities, not everyone's the same, right? Not everyone's a cookie cutter. So some are more religious, some less religious. Some will have a TV in their home, some won't. A lot won't, or whatever. There's certain standards. There are certain standards, but the whole point is, if you're living around people that have the same, quote unquote standards, whether they live up to all of them or not doesn't really matter, but they're thinking in the same ways, that's a whole different thing, right? That's why the Rambam says one of the 24 things that stops the person from repentance, separating themselves from a community. So non-Jews will say, oh, but it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah, in the Rambam, in the Code of Jewish Law, doesn't say anywhere I have to live amongst Jews. Well, how are you going to get a foundation of Judaism without that? You're not going to get it on your own. You're not going to get it from the internet, right? You get something. I'm not going to say not. You get something, but you won't get everything you need. You need that community. You need to be able to pray with people. You need to be able to mourn with people. Good things, bad things. You need to be part of it. You need the foundation. You need people to think the same way.
We're trying to grow as Noahides, Rabbi. Just to have that, I get calls all the time. I get emails. I get questions.
Because most communities don't have it. You don't have the numbers. They don't have learning centers. So for a lot of people, this is the best they have, right? Which is online. So is that better than nothing? Yes, it's absolutely better than nothing, right? That there's no question, and to get guidance and do the right thing. Okay, that's one of the goals. That's one of the goals, is to have places set up so people can come, people can learn. Yeah. Right, there is
got restrictions.
There is a method to the madness, but that is an issue, right? And for now, most people, again, they're stuck doing things online, but at least having people online and having people in similar situations, that's worth a lot. If you're trying if you were trying to do everything on your own, and you're the only one doing it, and everyone around you thinks you're an absolute fruitcake, which may or may not be true, right? But if you're
I know the feeling, Rabbi.
If you're doing things on your own, and you're surrounded by unlike-minded people, that is extremely frustrating. Extremely frustrating, extremely depressing. It can break a person's morale down, right? So, these things that we do,
thanks for understanding.
Trying to do as much as we can, inspiring people, etc., is to offset that. Because if you don't live in a community, and I remember somebody moved to a Jewish community, in the process of conversion, and they said, wow, that once they moved to a community, they couldn't believe what a difference it made. Of course it makes a difference. You're around people that pray. You're around people who go to synagogue. You're around people that keep Shabbos.
Encourage you as you encourage others.
That do what you're supposed to do. They may not be perfect. Nobody's perfect, right? But they're doing what they need to do in their service to God, right? And if you live in a place where that's not going on a regular basis, that's extremely frustrating, right? That I understand. That I understand. That's what we said over here, that living in a strong community, or, any Jewish community, that has, Orthodox Jews there with similar values. Right. So I remember, my own path, everyone around me did not have similar values. Right. I had to venture outside. Right. And, family still thinks I'm a fruitcake in many ways, and that's okay. But the rest of the Jewish community doesn't. Right. The Orthodox communities I've been a part of, it's a whole different ballgame. And sometimes that's what it takes. You have to go out of your comfort zone, but that's what, that's what you have to do. Now, not everyone has the ability to get up and move, and all that. That's all true. That's all true. But, when you're part of a group and they are backing up the values that you have and the values that you want to have and that you want to continue to grow, That's a whole world of difference than being in a world that's against it. And they make fun of it.
Rabbi,
and they're cynical and all that. Yeah.
This is the sole reason why I love to host these classes that you're so kindly doing for us, because you want to foster that atmosphere of the ethics that Pirkei Avos pours out, and I'd love to see more of that in communities around the globe. I mean, everybody needs it. The numerous broadcasts that I've done over the last several years, you want that ethic to get out there. I look at Torah as like an injection, like a cure, and we see people getting these vaccines, for this virus, and that little injection, will just change the person to the point of being capable. And I look at Torah as doing that. And the lesson series of Pirkei Avos, it's just something I know the world needs to grasp the core fundamental of the ethics, not argue it, listen, hear it, grasp it. And it runs deep, and it runs deeper and deeper. And you're never going to, master it all as a B'nai Noach. But I mean, I'm just thankful that learned rabbis like yourself are willing to share it.
So comes along duties of the heart, gate to repentance, gate of unity, chapter 5. I think it's in chapter 5. That tells us that, what does it say about the evil inclination there? So it tells us that even if the evil inclination doesn't succeed, right? The evil inclination doesn't rest. The evil inclination doesn't stop.
Nope.
If he's not successful, right? If he's not successful, then he's going to come another way. He's going to come in ways you never thought of. That's why you always have to be prepared, right? Over here, right? Sometimes be weak in one area, use his strength in other areas, right? In order, what's his job? His job is he wants you to fail, right? He wants you to sin. So therefore, what do the rabbis tell us? The rabbis tell us you got to be aware, right? You have to make decrees. You have to make fences around the Torah.
Huge.
So you stay away from transgression. Now, even if a person's older, right? An old person also can't let their guard down because of the power of the evil inclination, right? Which means like this: you got Yochanan Kohen Gadol. He was 80 years old, right? Sorry, he was over 100, 120, I think. Whatever it was, he spent 80 years being the high priest, right? So what happened? Being the high priest, that he ended up as a heretic, right? So that's why it says, "Do not believe in yourself until the last day," right? And that should be pretty obvious, because even when we're older, and there are different things that happen, right? A person go through all kinds of tragedies, different things. Whatever, a person's resolve can be weaker. It could be weaker. So therefore, that being the case, a person has to be strong even when they're older. They can't rely on what they were. If a person just goes through the motions, okay, a person can pray 3 times a day. They can fast, they can other things, they learn a little bit. But again, if it's not consistent, if a person's not working on themselves day in and day out, the answer is that you take a day off. A person wants to, put his feet up, sip a pina colada, watch Tom and Jerry, right? Whatever it is, right? They want to sit back, and for a day they just, out of mind, out of sight. All the stuff is pretty heavy, and all that. They want a little bit of a break, right? They have to know how to take a break, etc. But remember one thing: if a person, especially a Jew, if they learn every day, one day they don't learn, it's like they took 2 steps backwards, right? It's like now they almost have to learn double to make up what they could have done yesterday. So either we're going forward, or we're going the other way, right? Or we're going backwards. Now that can mean like this. That can mean that even with the best intentions, a person can just, go backwards. And a person has to be absolutely careful over here. And this is what the rabbis tell us, that we have to make our own fences. If we know we could transgress whatever the transgression is, and we want to stay away from this transgression like the plague. So you got to make fences around fences around fences in order to make sure you're not going to transgress. Now, someone will say, well, if you do that, even if you do it for yourself, that's adding on to the Torah. That's not adding on to the Torah. We mentioned this way back when. Making a fence around the Torah is guarding, preserving. Right? If you think about X, that could lead to you thinking about other things. That could lead you to spiral down a certain path. Right? So you have to work hard not to think about X. That's what you do. That's what you have to do. Right? Sometimes you say, okay, you thought about it, but it didn't have an effect. Right? Didn't have effect. You fought against it tremendously. Very good. Right? But somewhere, the inclination sees it's got an opening. Right? Once it sees it's got an opening, he's got a lot of time. He's got a lot of patience. Right? He is going to make sure that he tries to nail you. And that's why, we have to be intense. There are no days off. Essentially, there are no days off. Right? And if I take time off, I'm not saying a person can't go on vacation with their family, whatever, but essentially, if a person takes time off from God, even if it's for a day, it has an effect. It absolutely has an effect because our resolve becomes weaker. You're going to say, not by me, I need this and whatever. My resolve is going to be 10 times stronger. Again, the majority people, that's not going to be the case. Right? And therefore, we have to be ever so careful. Because
and community helps and study helps.
That all helps. Right? In other words, if you have people doing the same thing in general, and they're trying to be inspired, you're trying to be inspired, you're hanging around with those type of people, okay, now that doesn't mean by any way, shape, or form, that we're perfect, right? But it keeps us on the narrow path, right? That's what it does. Or what God forbid, what it could do is a person could be sort of lulled to sleep in the sense that they just start doing things by rote. Once you start doing things by rote, then that's akin to spiritual death. You get up, you say the prayers that you're supposed to say, you go to synagogue, you make blessings, keep Shabbos, keep the festivals, do this, do that. Yeah. You're doing all that.
Machinery.
But the soul is empty. But you're only a shell. Because what's the reason you're doing it? Because you don't want to fry in hell forever. You want to get good potential, marriage partners for your kids and all that. Right? But the reality is inside you're empty. Right? That there's a story that I read a while ago, more than a few years ago. Someone who gives classes in public and heads an institution and all that said about himself that, I give great classes, I've learned a lot, I head this institution, blah, 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 but they're empty. They're empty inside spiritually. Now, that's a little bit hard because if learning is supposed to inspire us, right? If, keeping mitzvahs is really supposed to inspire us. So that means what this person is doing, even at a very high level, what this person is doing with all the learning, with all the prayers and everything else, it's all worth very little because it doesn't have a connection to God. He's doing it for that, again, doesn't mean he doesn't believe in God. Doesn't mean he doesn't necessarily have a connection. That connection is pretty weak, right? It's only external, right? So, person will say, well, maybe this is your Hasidic side here coming out. Say we have to sing and dance a little bit, whatever. But you have to live inspired, right? You have to go beyond. Doesn't matter what God throws at you. Doesn't matter how much you get beaten down in life, right? It's all irrelevant, right? Because remember, God's using someone as a stick to get to us. And maybe he's using ourselves, right? Here's a little bit of an interesting idea. Maybe he gets us to overthink. Maybe since, we have too much free time, maybe, right? A person has too much free time. So what do? They overthink, right? And now they overanalyze. And now they play conversations back. And now all these different things that they do, it weakens a person's resolve. Why? Because you're not focused. And in this world, the Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, God put us in this world to reach potential. To get a portion of the next world means you have to reach a certain level. Whatever that level is, but you have to be in this world. You have to go, you have to struggle in this world. That's what it's about. Some struggle more, some struggle less. Everybody struggles. Everybody has it, right? But there's nothing worse, we mentioned earlier, there's nothing worse than having doubts. Right? This is what Amalek said. Now, I'm sure this is nothing you can relate to, right? Having everything clear cut and saying, okay, gonna get up tomorrow, gonna do this, gonna do that, gonna do the other thing, right? That we all have doubts to a certain extent, right? You know, to a certain extent. But see, we're living in times that the whole world is totally in flux, right? It's unbelievable what goes on, and we can second guess. We can second guess ourselves all the time. You know, a little bit OCD.
Well, evaluate.
Keep doing this, keep doing that, keep doing the other. Yeah, it happens. The question is how much we let it take over our lives, right? You know, in other words, let's say for argument's sake, person in the process of conversion. I get this a lot also. Person in the process of conversion. They move to a Jewish community. Jewish community does not roll out the red carpet, right? They make it difficult, right? Maybe too difficult sometimes, but let's just say, right? They make it difficult.
Actively.
Let's say they, they'll say, well, you want to come to synagogue? Fine. If not, maybe let's say a person has kids, they won't accept their kids in the school, in a Jewish school, right? Because
deliberately,
not all schools, I spoke about this last week, not all Jewish schools will take non-Jews in the process of conversion. Some will, some won't.
I see.
Right? Now, they have a right not to take non-Jewish kids. Right? Background, where they're coming from, where they're holding. And I know someone who's at school that did take their kids, and their kids didn't have play dates till after they converted. They're ostracized. You gotta say, well, that's not fair. It's not a question whether it's fair or not, right? That's not the issue.
Okay,
they're born a certain way. Their mother's not Jewish, right? Their values are not coming from a Jewish home, so therefore people are leery. They are leery. They should be, right? Someone comes to the school and it's a really strong school Jewishly, and someone has a TV in their house, right? And these kids tell other kids, oh, I watched this, I watched that, I watched the other thing. You think the parents who don't have a TV want their kids going over this kid's house? I don't think so. That's discrimination. No, it's not. Totally not discrimination. Right? Why should they accept it? That's criteria. You got to be Jewish. If you're not Jewish, they don't accept you. Right? You want to go to a Catholic school. Let's say, for argument's sake, they say you have to be a believing Catholic. Well, you're Jewish. I'm not a believing Catholic. Well, either be a believing Catholic, we're not going to accept you. It's a private school, right? The private school, they have the right. Right? A Muslim school, same thing, right? So you got to say that's discrimination. They have rules. They have regulations. You want to call it discriminatory? Okay, right? Doesn't mean the Jewish community has to roll out the red carpet, right? And the main reason is because we're not looking for converts. We're not interested in converts, right? And 20% or less don't even finish the process, right? So I've had people say, I'm trying to do this, trying to do that for so long, right? Okay, I'm not saying forever person should be ostracized and etc. But they have to know what they're up against, right? They're always going to be second guessed. That's just the reality, because you're on the outside coming in. And if you look at Torah in general, it doesn't make any sense what Jews are going through today. Anyone wants to convert. Either you want to be the real deal, or you're going to be absolute wacko, because it doesn't make sense, all these things. We're not at the top of the totem pole, right? So someone says, but I'm the real deal, and I can show I'm the real deal. I just need a chance, right? Okay, but it does, does a community have a right to be leery? Maybe someone's going to come missionize, maybe, right? That has happened in the past, but they want to see the person's the real deal. How long are they going to do that for? I don't know. right? That's not for me. But if they see in any way, shape, or form that a person's not going to toe the line, and they're not going to do, and they say things that are problematic, they're going to take their sweet little time because they don't want, they don't want a negative influence. They want people to come, and whatever the rabbis tell them to do, that's what they have to do. So an example I gave, there was a famous rapper, wanted to convert, a friend of mine was working with, and this rapper probably converted somewhere else, but in the rabbinical court that he wanted to go to, here in Israel, right, they didn't want him to rap in public, right, the way he wanted to, right? We're not talking about what Nissan Black is doing today, right? But he wanted to fill up stadiums, other things, whatever it was, right? Now, obviously, you got a language problem, you got a lot of other issues, right? But the bottom line is that a rabbinical court did not want on their conscience. No. They're going to say this person's Jewish, and look what he's doing, right? But one of the things they wanted to show, beyond the shadow of a doubt, is, we are rabbinical authorities. You have an obligation. You're coming to us. You have to listen. And what 100%. Did this guy show? What did this guy show? I'm not listening. I'm going to do what I want, right? And obviously, that's a red flag, right? I had students that went to a certain rabbinical court, and the rabbinical court said, well, if we tell you have to move to a stronger community, what would you say to us? I said, well, just tell us what we have to do, and we'll move. If we tell you, it's right before Rosh Hashanah, if we tell you can't convert till after Sukkot, and you have to go through Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot as a non-Jew, again, what would you say? They said, we're not going anywhere. You tell us exactly what we have to do, right? 1 second. You tell us exactly what we have to do, and that's what we're going to do. And that was the right answer, right? That was an extremely proud moment for me. That's what they wanted to hear, right? Does that mean they're worshiping the rabbis? No, but there's a mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to listen to what they say, right? Where there's extortion, where they're doing things wrong, that's a different issue. In this case, where they want to make sure you're going to stay in the straight and narrow path, and if you go down this other path, it's not going to be good, why should they sanction it? Why do they have an obligation to sanction it? So that you wouldn't do this, if you wanted to be a Christian, and you're going to tell them, I want to convert to Christianity, but I'm not putting any water on my head. Not in the bathtub, not in the ocean. You're not doing anything. They're going to say, next, right? Maybe not. Maybe you pay enough, maybe. Maybe it won't be a problem. You tell the Muslims, same thing. I'm going to do this, that, but, I'm going to drink wine. I just can't give up wine. Right? You go against any of their things, what are they going to tell you? You're out of here. Why is it that people think within Judaism, I have a right to do what I want. I have a right to say what I want. I'm coming to them. They have an obligation to look the other way. Who in the world says? You're not making conditions. You don't have a say over here. Right? Again, I'm not saying the rabbis have to be extremely difficult. I'm not saying that, if the rabbis are doing extortion or other things, it's wrong. 100%. But where do people comp an attitude? I see this a lot. Where do people have a chutzpah to comp an attitude and say, I know better, you're going to do what I want, etc. Question.
Okay, I may be diverting a little bit, but I want to take exactly the point you just brought and relate it to B'nai Noach, because we're not converting, okay? Technically, we're not converting. And if I'm becoming a convert, I fully respect that I am submitting myself to the leadership of the rabbinical authority and in the chain. Now, as B'nai Noach trying to grow communities out here, we find it very hard because we get the kindness, and you've even spoke on your Tanakh Talk series, are they obliged to teach the Torah to non-Jews? And you gave the clarity of statement on that. And so the point being, we're left out here to try to walk this properly and ethically and to do it right and hang on to the hem of the garment of a learned rabbi and grow and learn and try to develop these communities. But there's still that disconnect because the rabbis, we're not moving into their community, and we find as B'nai Noach, you know what converts go through when they come to a Jewish community. I know B'nai Noachs that try to go into a Jewish synagogue or try to get close to a Jewish rabbi. And it turns into a real mayhem, but I'm trying to sort it through.
I get it. Well, let me say it like this. What would happen? What would happen if, a whole bunch of people put together money and they put up a storefront for B'nai Noah, right? In their city, wherever
I looked at 5 places in the last 6 months.
Let's say that could be perpetuated over time. Not a huge expense, right? You get a lot of people to chip in. Right now, is the rabbi going to live in the middle of the prairies? No, right? That's not going to happen, right? Not even me. That's not going to happen. But there are a lot of different things that could happen, right? You could bring people in. You could live stream, right? There are a lot of different potential ways, but you have people come to a place. But see, I think one of the main problems is, and some may disagree, but I think one of the problems.
No, your opinion's valued, highly valued.
I think one of the main problems, forget about trying to get Bnei Noach to come, right? Trying to find them, and all that. The question is, okay, you're talking about a specific thing. So where are people going for that leadership? Where are they going for that leadership? Who are the ones answering the questions? Right? People that are qualified, or people that, okay, they sort of deal with Bnei Noach, but it's like hands off, and they're not looking at the bigger picture, and they're just doing their own thing, and that's it, right? If you were to say, listen, we want, someone to help and, get this off the ground, et cetera, you have to go to someone who knows what they're doing, who is qualified. Doesn't mean he has to live in the community, right? I don't think there's any question about that, right? He's not going to live in the community. But what would happen, in any of these places? Let's say someone got something started, right? Somewhere, wherever it is, and what if someone said, you know what? Once every 3 weeks, they're going to come, right? Once every 3 weeks, they're going to come. 2 days, 3 days. And this is going to zap everyone with all kinds of inspiration, right? Wouldn't that be worth something? Of course it'd be worth something, right? But where's the vision? People talk. I've heard a lot of people say things. I haven't seen any people do anything. I'm not talking about you. I haven't seen people do anything. All they do is talk, right? In other words, the people either that they're going to, or their ideas, or both, they're both skewed. There's somebody who's been involved with Noahides for the last 15 years, more than 15 years, and he's convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt that you cannot build a Noahide center, have people come to it. It's just not going to happen. It hasn't been successful, right? Someone's done it in Humboldt, Texas, right? Yeah. Roth Bryant, right? The place in Calgary, I think, right? Somewhere in South Africa, whatever. Maybe not be so big, whatever it is. Okay, so I'm not saying some of them are being run by the right people. That's a different issue. Because I know one person that was in charge, right? It wasn't Ron Bryant, it was somebody else. And that person should be in charge of anything. I wouldn't even let him flush my toilet in my house. But we're not gonna go down that path. But in general,
it's a fine line, Rabbi. I have to say it's a fine line because if we step too far, we're gonna get clipped for being heretics. And it's a very
why, but again, that's why whoever's going to give the advice has to know what they're doing, right? If people want to stray, and do more and this and that, you have to have an authority, a rabbinic authority, who you're going to go to, who's going to tell you this is what you're allowed to do, this is what you're not allowed to do, right? You don't want people straying over that line. They'll take responsibility. That rabbinical authority will take responsibility, right, for that. But, it can't be a free-for-all, right?
That's right, 100%.
There cannot be any of these things without rabbinic guidance. Can't be, right? And I think from what I've seen, the little that I've seen, that, I've seen individuals try and do things or try and set things up, and a
lot of waste of time and energy.
In my language, one second. In my language, I would say it's almost laughable. Right? It's almost laughable because people don't know what they're doing. Yeah. I mean, I see people talk a good game, giving classes in Kabbalah when they should be learning other things, which is absolutely insane. And these people are absolutely insane, right? I'll go online saying that. But, in general, again, who are the people doing it and where are they getting their guidance from? And unfortunately, in the Noahide world, right, there's a lot of fraud out there, right? In the conversion world, there's also a lot of fraud out there, unfortunately, right? And there are people that may not be frauds. They may be well-meaning, but they're not seeing the bigger picture, right? Having a conference in Jerusalem, having people come, that's a good thing, right? That, do it once a year, every 2 years, whatever, that's a good thing. When people are connected and this and that. What about in individual places? What about in individual places? It's good to come to Jerusalem. I'm not saying not after this pandemic. Everything settles. It's a good thing. Draw people to the Western Wall, go on tours, other things, get inspiration. Makes a lot of sense, right? I see someone advertising a Noahide camp for 3 days, 4 days, something like that.
Yeah, no, they invited me personally. Yeah,
which I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, right? So it certainly sounds good getting Noahides come together, going somewhere, etc. 3-4 days, in the summer, maybe having some guest speakers, different things, doing it within a place, bringing people to it. It's one thing. Doing something virtual, and not much more than that in the bigger scheme of things, is not a good thing because you're not perpetuating what you need to do. What needs to be done in general.
Yeah, you're
in the Noahide world, which again, someone claims it can't be done because he's tried to do it and he claims it can't be done. I'm not that.
Well, it depends how much you want to spend or throw at it.
It's not just a question of money. Money's an issue. That's not the only issue. Right? Again, I would be convinced. I would think if someone built a learning center, right? I know actually in Humboldt, Texas with Rod Bryant, they got 40, 50 families there, at least. I think about 40, 50 families on a regular basis. They are contributing to this place, right? In other words, they're keeping it going. They have people come in, speak live. They have things that are, they have a lot of things that are virtual, as well, right? But I'm not convinced something like that cannot work, right? Okay, they have a bigger Jewish community around them. That certainly helps, right? But even without a rabbi there, one of the things there's a certain group doing, which I'm trying to help them with, is to train Noahides to go back and be leaders in their own communities, right? That's one thing that we're working on. So that's why I gave this class in Derech Hashem, in the way of God about Noahides be able to answer other people, what spiritual forces are, what the purpose in the world is, what's the purpose of the non-Jews, reincarnation, all these different things, right? So they're able at a certain depth to be able to answer to other people, so to speak, through these teachings, a lot of basic things about Judaism. So again, I am not convinced that, different communities can work, right? I'm not convinced that it won't work. You just need enough like-minded people, in order to keep it going, right? So, if let's say, you're in the prairies, you had 40 families, you had 40 people, that want to chip in every month, right? It doesn't have to be a significant cost. Want to chip in to do something like that, that can work, right? Especially, if you rent out a place, say $1,000 a month, $1,500,
$2,500 up here in Canada.
Whatever it is, right? You get 40 people to pitch in. That's doable. That's not impossible.
No.
Right? You're not asking for $500, a person. Obviously, it's not going to go. Right? The more people you get involved, the easier it should be. The problem is, if you live in a place, you don't have so many people. But if you have enough, I would say like this: if you have enough people, and you could do that, then you can do other things. Then, I was working with somebody, didn't pan out for a number of reasons, right? But, if you build it like in Field of Dreams, right, people will come. But obviously you need enough people to sustain it. But, imagine, if people came in, different rabbis came in, every so often, injecting spirituality, right? Doesn't mean they have to live there. And then you do other live streaming things and other things. That should or could be enough in order to sustain it, right? If you're in a bigger Jewish community, obviously it's easy, it's easier. But the problem is you got people all over the place. You don't have people, in major cities, and you don't have enough people in different places.
That's the practical side.
That's a good part of the issue, because then you only have a few people, and then it's not going to be worth it, right? It's certainly not going to be worth it, monetarily, unless you get someone to back it, right? So that's what I see. That's what I see as the issue. I'm not, I might be naive, but I don't think it's an impossibility, right? It just depends. I would say it depends on how many people you would have behind it. And if you have enough people behind it and the expenses are relatively minimal, right, for each person, then I would say why shouldn't it work? Right? You have to have boundaries. You're not going to have prayer services. You're not going to have holidays, right? You have to be under the guidance of someone who knows what they're doing.
That's why I follow the Noahide World Center, Rabbi. But then even getting to know people like yourself, it's joy that when you're teaching these classes, the information comes out, but more so to have the connections where you can actually ask a real person who is a knowledgeable rabbi. I'd pick your brain any chance I could if you were available.
Don't pick too much. There won't be much left. Like my hair, but again, I think part of the issue is that some people only want to get involved to a certain extent,
right?
And other people just don't see the bigger picture, right? They see the bigger picture.
Well, they're in it for the wrong motive,
but they don't see the bigger picture out in the world, right? And someone will say, "Well, if you lived here or you lived there, things would be different." Okay, but I don't, right? I'm not five people here. Right. But again, if you had enough people coming in, giving strength and doing what they need to do and giving Noahides what they need to, I think it would be a no-brainer. You just need enough people to support it. And it's a hard thing for Noahides to support anything because they think you should get everything for free. And that's a different
issue.
So
beggarly, isn't it? It's beggarly.
It's whatever. It's beyond pathetic. And I always tell people, like my wife would say, say, why should I pay for your class? I can just learn on the internet. I said, okay, so learn on the internet. And my wife will say, okay, they'll be back. Because there's nothing there, like package, like what I do. Maybe some other people do something similar or whatever. But okay, so a person will say, wow, I'll take all these classes, etc. Okay, right? But again, a person could have a much more powerful thing and was more organized, right, in different ways. But, that being the case, that means it's going to cost the person money. That's what it means, right? And a person says, well, if they're in a financial bind or whatever, it's one thing. But many people, even if they're not in a financial bind, they say, why should I pay for it? I mean, why should you pay for it? You want to have a storefront. You want to have people come. You want to have people get inspired. Costs money, right? May not be so expensive, right? But it costs money. Why should it be for free? You find one rich person to back it, good. But if you don't have that, take 30 people. 40 people, right? If it's $2,000 a month, that's $50 a month for 40 people. That's not that much.
No.
That's junk food you buy in a week and a half, or less, right?
You know what it's like,
$50 a month, unless the person's only on Social Security or other things or whatever. But in general, most people should be able to find that amount of money. Okay, you got to find 30 people, 40 people, right, to do that. And it's got to be consistent. But again, why should anyone expect that should be for free, right? People may come and speak. They may charge a certain amount. Okay, right? That's fair. But what is the person getting? That's the question. You set up something like that. People come, bring in speakers, do live stream, whatever. They're getting what they need. I think that's a whole different ballgame because they're around people that think the same way. Mm-hmm. The only problem is in a lot of places you don't have a lot of people you like that. So that's an issue. Right, that is definitely an issue, right? You live in prairie land over there. I get it. I get it. But a person upon, if there are people in bigger cities, right, and you have more, access to more people, it could happen, right? It could certainly happen. But but again, if a person wants to see something like this happen, and get it off the ground, it's going to take money to do it. It's going to take money and a little bit of manpower to do it, right?
Rabbi.
I don't think there's any question, and no one in their right mind should think it's going to happen by itself, and no one in the right mind should think it's going to be done without money. For goodness sakes, if there are good people out there and they know what they're doing and they're giving you a service, say I could get it on the internet, but here you're given an opportunity. You're given a golden opportunity to build something, hopefully, and be part of something. Why is that not worth? Why is that not worth money? That is absolutely worth money. It's gold because nobody has it. Very few people have it. The ones that have it, they're living in Humble, Texas, or nearby. They're getting all this stuff. What Rod Bryant does? Tremendous. Tremendous. They have a community. They have people around them. And, they know it's worthwhile to keep up. Yes. Because, and a lot of things they get is live stream. They're not necessarily getting all these rabbis to come and speak there. That's not what they're getting. Sometimes Rod gives class or whatever. A lot of it's coming from the outside. So if it's coming from the outside, what are the expenses going to be? The expense is going to be the place you're doing it. Right? Now, you can start in someone's living room. You can do that. Someone's basement. Whatever, until things get underway. Right? But you have to, I always think big.
Oh, libraries people talk.
My Rabbi says if you think small, you'll end up small. If you think big, you may not end up big, but you won't end up small. So I got a huge vision for a lot of different things. Okay? It has to come to fruition. Right? Hopefully it will. But you have to have the vision to see. And, it's a shame. It's a shame that for some this won't come about, because they think I should get it for free, right? And they think it's not something I should pay for. Well, that would be great if everything could be for free.
Some of them don't realize they muzzle the ox.
100%.
They literally muzzle the ox when they they have that vision.
If you're in a place that you don't have a lot of like-minded people, right, it's going to be more expensive to do. Right, definitely more expensive to do. But that doesn't mean you can't. Metropolises like New York, where there's a hotbed of learned Jewish people. You'd think with millions and millions and millions of population, you'd think there'd be multiple B'nai Noach facilities there in New York. And I've connected with lots of people in Queens and lots of people in Brooklyn, lots of people in New York. But I remember my broadcast about 2 years ago, year and a half ago. I had a person reach out to me from New York who actually was a rabbi, Shmika holding rabbi, and he was just talking to me on the down low, didn't identify himself as a rabbi, and the point being, he was really scrutinizing, and he says he's never, ever, ever in his life met a real B'nai Noach. And, he was probing me, and he was questioning, and he was probing, and he was questioning, right. He just didn't believe that one could exist. And I was shocked. I was like, what? Because he probably thinks that anyone is so interested, they'll end up converting. Right? That's the misnomer. That's a misnomer. But the point is, since, we are running out of time and probably burning up your system there, the question is how much desire people have. Yeah. Right? Again, we'll quote Field of Dreams, if you have the desire. Yeah. Right? Now, God has to bless it. God absolutely has to bless it. Right? But first of all, you have to have the desire. And I don't think most people understand what it is and what it potentially could do. Right? Because, I got the ability to go to, all these different synagogues all the time. Right? Where I live and where I've lived in the past. So, a non-Jew, okay, can't go to church. Right? They may not, be able to go to synagogue, whatever. They need a place to go. They need that.
Make it alive, make it real. Yeah.
Even if there's no, no service, even if there's no quote unquote holidays or, whatever, the only way it's going to get manifested, right, is if you build it, then they will come. That's what has to be done. You have to go out and do it. Right. But going out and doing it, okay. What do you think? The evil inclination wants it? Certainly not. Right. So, you're going to find enough like-minded people, wherever a person may be. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a storefront. It could be, it could start in someone's house once a week. Whatever.
Not in mine.
I need
a storefront or nothing.
Yeah. Okay. So, wherever it is, trying to make it.
I lost your vocals, Rabbi.
You have to see the bigger picture, right? If you see the bigger picture and then you're part of something, it's a whole different ball game than just doing everything virtually, right? That's what it is, and that can't be underemphasized. You ask any non-Jew that converted and they moved to a Jewish community, it was a game changer, right? It was an absolute game changer because now they're part of the community. Now they can go to synagogue. Now they can do these other things. It's a lot different than when you're totally isolated, right? And again, these classes and other classes, that are good, etc., that a person can get, virtually, and that's what, unfortunately, that a lot of people, that's all they have. That is worth something, right? But again, you have to see where the information's coming from, who's giving it, and all that in order to get what you need to, get.
Well, Rabbi, can you sum it up? If we, I got to get ready for my next broadcast. I want to thank you for today's class. There's a lot there. There's so much to digest. Especially, I thank you for taking the time these last 15 minutes or so to, be clear for me. It really does a lot of help, and I hope it helps
the other
B'nai Noach out there.
That, I guess in conclusion, that when we say this part of the mission, because we're going to get next part of the mission next week, do not judge a fellow until you've reached this place. Quite a bit to speak about that also.
Huge.
But, don't believe in yourself until the day you die, right? Means that we can never take anything for granted, ever, right? In other words, we have to keep growing. We can't be stagnant. We can't be lazy. We can't be wanting to sip pina coladas, even though it's fun, right? We have to be, I guess for lack of a better term, you have to be like the Energizer Bunny. You have to want it, like King Solomon says in Proverbs. You have to want Torah, like rubies, like diamonds, and everything else, and you have to go out and grab it, because God's not going to just hand it to you on a platter, right? It's like anything else. Anything else the person's ever wanted. Person wants to be a gymnast. Person wants to be an athlete. You got to train. You got to work hard, right? You want Torah? Multiply that by infinity. You got to want it so bad you can smell it. And you just have to be, determined. You have to want it more than anything else. And a person wants that. The Talmud says, you want to go in the right direction, God's going to help you. You don't want to go in the right direction, God's not going to stop you. But that's where it starts. Once it starts there, then you have to start living inspired. And don't think that the evil inclination is going to let up. Because the evil inclination is going to, you really want to be a strong Noahide? Oh, yeah, let me show you this, that, and the other thing. The person has to be steadfast. They have to be strong. They have to try and be consistent. And, they have to live inspired, even if times are hard. And again, that's a lot easier said than done.
Wow. That's the truth. And you heard it right from the rabbi's mouth there. I think that should be enough for anybody. So, Rabbi, we're going to jump to 2:6 next week, chapter 2, Mishnah 6.
No, we're still in the fifth Mishnah. The next part of the Mishnah is don't judge a fellow until you've reached this place. Right?
We're still in Mishnah 5 of chapter 2.
I don't know exactly. I don't know exactly how far we're going to get with that next week. We'll get through part of it. Definitely get through part of it. I don't know if we'll get through all of it. We'll see. But it's still part of.
Are we on for next week?
5. Chapter 2, Mishnah 5. So that's where we're holding.
So Hashem willing, we're go for next week.
We're good for next. Yeah, as long as hopefully I don't see any. I don't see any reason why not.
If anything changes, let me know. So, folks, we're going to wind it down, and I want to thank you all for attending. Everybody out there, we're all around the planet. Nina down in Brazil, thanks for joining. I forgot to drop her name the other day, Rabbi, so I had to mention. Appreciate everybody. We got our compliment there in Germany and people from all around the planet. It's a joy to be with you all, but more so, it's a joy to hear the Torah shining out of the nation of Israel. And thank you so much, Rabbi Coffman. So till next week, folks, have a wonderful, wonderful week.